Hola amigos! Today, we are learning how to conjugate the verb tener. Tener, to have. But we're also learning how to use tener with some important expressions. If you're new to my channel, I am teacher Catalina. If you're trying to learn Spanish or improve your Spanish, you've come to the right place. I teach Spanish. Now, I'd like to invite you to click that subscribe button so that you and I can continue learning together. To my loyal viewers, thank you so much for all of your support. You allow me to bring the Spanish lessons to everybody. For more free resources, go to teachercatalina.com and click on the library of resources. By the way, if at any point you feel like smashing that like button, please do so. It really helps my channel. So let's get into today's topics. Like I said before, we are focusing on the verb tener, which we already know it means to have. So we're gonna learn how to say I have, you have, they have, and all of those conjugations. Now, keep in mind that the verb tener in Spanish is also used for some important expressions that may not directly translate in English. For example, I may say, I have hunger. I know you don't say that in English, but in Spanish, when we're talking about hunger, we have to use the verb tener. The same thing happens with a few more expressions that we will cover throughout the video. So first things first, we have to learn how to conjugate the verb tener. I know you already know how to conjugate regular AR, ER, and IR verbs. And although tener ends in an ER, I want to make sure that you remember that tener is an irregular verb. What does that mean? It simply means that tener is a bit of a rebel. It does not follow the same rules that we learn with regular AR, ER, and IR verbs. So we're going to categorize it as an irregular verb, and therefore we have to be a little careful and learn all of its irregularities. So subject pronouns are back on our board, and now we can start conjugating. Let me show you what happens with the yo form of tener. Remember, it's an irregular. The yo form of tener is tengo. Tengo. Yo tengo. Do you see how we took off the ER, but we added a go? Tengo. That makes it an irregular. It does not follow the pattern. So again, if you want to say something like I have, maybe you want to say I have a dog, you would say yo tengo un perro. Yo tengo un perro. Yo form out of the way. Now, let me bring your attention to the tú form of tener. But before I go over it, I want to make sure that you know that the tú form, él, ella, and usted form, and the ellos, ellas, and ustedes form all have a change in the stem. Do you remember the parts of a verb? If not, let's do a super quick review. The AR, ER, and IR is what we call the ending of the verb. Whatever's left over, that's the stem. So again, we have a change on the stem of the tú form, él, ella, and usted, and also ellos, ellas, and ustedes. What happens? Well, that E is going to change to IE. Again, that E changes to IE. So let's look at the tú form. The conjugation for tú, for the verb tener, is tienes. Tienes. Tú tienes. You have a dog. Tú tienes un perro. Tú tienes un perro. Do you notice that change? The E changed to IE. Again, important because that's another one of the irregularities of the verb tener. I know it's a lot to remember, but again, I promise you, a little practice and you'll get used to it. So far we have yo tengo, tú tienes. Él, ella, and usted, you already know that it also has a change in the stem. So the correct conjugation is tiene. Tiene. Ella tiene un gato. Ella tiene un gato. So again, we have tengo, tienes, tiene. We said a little bit earlier that some of the changes happen in the yo form, the tú form, the él, ella, and usted form, and the ellos, ellas, and ustedes. But notice how I never said there were any changes in the nosotros or the vosotros, because there's no change there. So the correct conjugation for nosotros is tenemos. Tenemos. Nosotros tenemos un caballo. Nosotros tenemos un caballo. See how we didn't change anything? And in that case, we treated it like a regular verb in a way. Tener, it's still an irregular verb because we change a bunch of things already. But when it comes to the nosotros and the vosotros form, there are no changes. Vosotros. Vosotros tenéis un conejo. Vosotros tenéis un conejo. Again, no change in that vosotros form. And finally, let's get to our last conjugation. Ellos, ellas, and ustedes. A little bit ago, I told you that there is a change on the stem on this conjugation. And you already know that. The E changes to IE. So the correct conjugation is tienen. Tienen. Ellos tienen un gato. Ellos tienen un gato. Ustedes tienen un perro. Ustedes tienen un perro. Amigos, that is it for all of the conjugations of the verb tener. Now, you've noticed firsthand how irregular this verb can be. Actually, how irregular it is. So it is very important that you work on memorizing those conjugations. It may be a little bit tricky at the beginning, but just be patient with yourself. It's going to become second nature as you continue using it and memorizing it. So before we move into the tener expressions, let's review these conjugations one more time because we have to use them with the expressions. For yo, tengo. Tú, tienes. Él, ella, and usted, tiene. Nosotros, tenemos. Vosotros, tenéis. And ellos, ellas, and ustedes, tienen. Now, the best thing you can do is memorize these conjugations to avoid any confusion here. Remember, if you've already memorized the subject pronouns, all you will have to do is memorize this part of the board. So then you will simply memorize tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, and tienen. And you would know what subject pronoun they go with. So let's do a really quick example so that you can see how we may use the verb tener. Tener. So somebody may ask me, ¿qué tienes en tu cartera? ¿Qué tienes en tu cartera? Cartera is a purse. However, my specific cartera that I adore, it truly is called una mochila colombiana. Una mochila colombiana. It is made in Colombia, and I love this kind of handcrafted product. However, for the sake of this lesson, we're gonna go ahead and generalize it and call it a purse. Una cartera. So again, ¿qué tienes en tu cartera? En mi cartera tengo. En mi cartera tengo. Un cuaderno. Tengo un cuaderno. Tengo una billetera. Tengo una billetera. Tengo maquillaje. Tengo maquillaje. Y tengo marcadores. Tengo marcadores. Tengo muchas cosas en mi cartera. So the main thing that you have to remember about the verb tener is that it is that's right, an irregular verb. Please make sure that you remember that. Now, teacher Catalina, what if I want to say I don't have something? What do I do? Well, my guess is you already know what we need to do if you've been watching our previous lessons. But if you need a review or you're just joining us, the main thing you do is you put a no in front of the conjugated verb. You put a no in front of the verb. So, for example, I may say, ¿tienes un marcador en tu cartera? ¿Tienes un marcador en tu cartera? Do you have a marker in your purse? And you don't. Then you would say, no tengo un marcador en mi cartera. No tengo un marcador en mi cartera. Did you see we put that no in front of the verb? That's exactly what you do to say you don't have something. Although we use the verb tener to talk about the things that we have, like, for example, things in your backpack or your purse, or the family members or friends that you may have, we also use tener for some very specific expressions. Now, I'm going to warn you, the translation to English, it's a little bit funky. It doesn't translate perfectly, and it may sound a little bit weird to you. But the main thing that you need to remember is that for those specific expressions, you have no option. You have to use the verb tener. Let's start with one of those expressions that is actually going to be really important to you. Let's say you want to talk about age. You want to say how old you are, or you want to ask somebody how old they are. Well, in English, you are a certain number of years old. In that case, you're using the verb to be in English. I am 17. I am 20. I am 30 years old. Warning, in Spanish, we are not a certain number of years old. In Spanish, we have a certain number of years of life. So we have to use the verb tener. So for example, I would ask you, ¿cuántos años tienes? ¿Cuántos años tienes? How many years do you have? In other words, how many years of life do you have? Do you see how we use the verb tener? There you go. So the answer would be, yo tengo, whatever number, años. Yo tengo, whatever your age is, años. For example, yo tengo 30 años. Yo tengo 40 años. Yo tengo 50 años. That's the pattern that you're going to follow with the tener expression for age. So the main warning here, because this is a very common mistake that I want to make you aware of. The main thing you have to remember, in Spanish, you are never, ever going to use the verb ser for age. Don't do that. When you talk about age, you always use the verb tener. Always. Do remember that the tener part of our expression is going to change depending on who you're talking about. If you want to say he has 20 years, he has 20 years of life, you would say él tiene 20 años. Él tiene 20 años. Other common expressions include tener hambre, to have hunger, tener sed, to have thirst, and tener prisa, to have a rush, to be in a hurry. Remember that although the tener part is in its infinitive form, basically it has not been conjugated, you have to conjugate it to make sure we know who you're talking about. Who is having hunger? Who is having thirst? Who is having a rush? Who's in a rush? So again, don't forget to conjugate the tener part of these expressions so that you and I know who we're talking about. So let's look at tener hambre. Tener hambre. Again, it's a little bit funky when you translate it into English because you wouldn't say, I have hunger. You would say, I am hungry. Again, think this way in Spanish. You have hunger. You have to use the verb tener. So if I'm hungry, I would say, yo tengo hambre. Yo tengo hambre. ¿Tienes hambre? ¿Tienes hambre? Again, you could say, sí tengo hambre, or no tengo hambre. The same thing happens for the expression tener sed. Tener sed, to have thirst. Again, you have to conjugate the tener part. So if I'm thirsty, I would say, tengo sed. Tengo sed. Necesito agua, por favor. I need some water, please. Tengo sed. And remember, if she is thirsty, if she has thirst, you would say, ella tiene sed. Ella tiene sed. And again, the same thing is going to happen for the expression tener prisa, to have a rush, to be in a hurry. I could say, tengo prisa, tienes prisa, tiene prisa, tenemos prisa, so on and so forth. So there are a lot more tener expressions that you will encounter later on as we continue our journey through learning Spanish, but these are going to be some of the most useful ones at this stage. So again, tener, number of años, to talk about age. Tener hambre, to talk about hunger. Tener sed, if you're thirsty, to talk about thirst. And tener prisa, to talk about being in a hurry. Again, tener is in the infinitive, so you have to conjugate it. Muy bien! Felicidades! You did it! You conjugated tener and you learned some important tener expressions. The main thing to remember here is that tener is a very irregular verb, so you have to be very careful with the conjugations and work on memorizing them. And then don't forget to review these tener expressions, and you'll be pretty comfortable using that verb tener to talk about the things that you have and to talk about things such as when you have hunger, when you have thirst, when you have a rush, and when you have a certain number of years, especially to talk about age. Don't forget to go to teachercatalina.com for a lot of free resources, including resources on the verb tener, so that you can review and practice on your own. And of course, don't forget that this video is here for you to play and replay as many times as you need to. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and learning how to conjugate the verb tener. Please, if you have not yet subscribed, I'd like to invite you to click that subscribe button so that you and I can continue learning together. And if you haven't gotten a chance yet because you were so invested in the lesson to smash that like button, please do so. It really helps my channel and I certainly appreciate it. Don't forget, again, to go to teachercatalina.com and I will see you next time. Adios!